Hey, thanks for clicking on the video. Today, we return to Titans for another broken build. This build utilizes some recent buffs, a slept-on subclass, a broken combo, and some new additions to give Titans just one more overpowered build. This is one that makes a simple infinite ammo option go from dealing 21,000 damage to 210,000. Or, in the terms of a glaive combo, nearly 450,000 damage by itself. But before we break everything down, I'd like to point out that there are timestamps and a dim link down below for your convenience. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss my future builds. And with that said, let's begin with the exotic weapon of choice. This build will be running Winterbite, but not for obvious reasons. This is an exotic heavy glaive with the perk reading, it fires a large ball of energy that locks onto nearby targets and freezes them. You can see this in game, shooting out this slow projectile that does exactly as the description states. While this projectile is cool and all, it almost has no bearing on why we've actually chosen to use Winterbite for the build. The real main contributor is the weighted edge perk that reads, this weapon's melee attacks deal increased damage and slow targets when loaded with ammo. This is what allows Winterbite to do substantially more damage than regular glaives. Here we're dealing 21,000 damage per melee, with a regular special glaive dealing only 14,000 damage. So Winterbite is considerably higher at base. Winterbite also intrinsically slows on hit, which we can see freezes Carl after just 3 swings or after 1 combo. And while we're on the topic of combo, we do need to mention the first big ticket buff that makes this build so good. Here's the notes, and glaives received some nice general buffs with the release of Heresy, but the one that affects us the most is here, where the final hit in a glaive combo now deals double damage. And we actually just saw that, where our standard damage was 21,000 per melee hit, the third hit deals just under 38,000. Now that's not double a base melee, but it is much higher, making the third hit actually worth doing. Granted, if you're experienced at all with glaives, you can still do the tech where you hold block and spam melee for overall faster melee spam. But at base, this new higher damage third hit and Winterbite's intrinsic higher damage is what gives Winterbite the high melee damage output and what we're going to focus this build on. And before moving to our exotic armor piece, Winterbite also has the tilting at windmills perk, which effectively just increases our blocking movement speed. I probably didn't even need to mention that. Now then, we know where our damage and focus of the build is. How do we buff it? And to no one's surprise, the answer to that question is the Synthoceps exotic arms. This is the perk that I'm sure most of us know, where when you're surrounded, gain increased melee and super damage, as well as improved weapon handling and reload speed. There isn't much fanfare here. We want the increase in melee damage, which we can see brings our third hit to 76,000 for a nice 100% bonus. And then the other benefits are standard melees and abilities get 165% increase in damage, and supers get a 50% increase in damage. All of these are beneficial, as every single ability we'll use in today's build is going to get some kind of buff. And with that, we can now enter our subclass and look how that's set up. What you're seeing might look familiar or even a little nostalgic, as we're running a Strand Titan. Make no mistake, just because you see Prismatic Titan tearing up the endgame, Strand Titan hasn't gotten any weaker. This subclass is still far too busted. So our abilities are as follows. We've only got one super option. Run this for a get out of jail free card and some respectable damage output. Our class ability can be either Barricade, I'm not going to use it that much. Probably go with Rally just for this lower cooldown. Our melee is forced to be Frenzy's Blade, as if we'd want anything else. Granted, while we're focusing a lot on our glaive, you can't use Frenzied Blade while the glaive is actually out. Though if you're ever stunning a champ or something, 3 charges of this melee are very lethal, and it's not hard at all to just swap weapons real quick when you do want to melee something. And then for our grenade, I think it's gotta be grapple. You get mobility plus high damage that benefits from synthoceps. Just make sure to swap off the glaive again when swinging, or you can't grapple melee. But now for our aspects, these are about as standard as a Strand Titan gets. The first easy pick is Into the Fray. This gives us Woven Mail when destroying tangles and increases our melee regen when that buff is active. This aspect is cracked because it essentially gives us 100% uptime on a 45% DR. It also gives us many more melees than we normally have. But our next aspect is what takes our melee damage even higher, that being Banner of War. When getting melee kills, glaives included, we get a buff that heals us and increases our melee damage. If we continue to get kills, it heals us even more. In game, we can see Banner of War applying itself to us after getting a glaive melee kill. And while we can get more stacks of Banner to increase the speed at which we get healed, the damage increase is always going to be the same, which if we look here, takes us up to 85,493 on the third hit of the combo. This aspect in this build was actually specifically nerfed a while back to be only a 12.5% bonus when paired with synthoceps, but more damage is more damage. Not to mention, the survivability boost here from Banner of War is flat out incredible. So even if it didn't offer more damage, I would still be running this. But then to take our build just a bit further, we have the Fragments. The main one we'll want is Thread of Transmutation. This fragment allows our Winterbite's melee, and all weapons for that matter, to spawn tangles while we have Woven Mail. This allows Into the Fray to become a never-ending loop. Then after that fragment, we have Thread of Warding, which gives us Woven Mail and Orb Pickup for some fallback in case teammates steal a tangle or something like that. The next is Thread of Generation, so while we slay out, we get grapple energy back. And then finally, Thread of Continuity, which makes any of our strand debuffs last just a bit longer. Although you could swap this last fragment out for Thread of Evolution for more damaging threadlings, which can be built into with our other weapons. Speaking of, what would those be? Well, you're gonna want to mainly cater them to whatever activity you run. Winterbite does counter Unstoppable and Overload champions intrinsically, so you're gonna want an anti-barrier weapon if those do appear. But if you wanted to build into threadlings, like I just mentioned, you're going to want a strand weapon specifically, but more on that in just a moment when we cover the artifact. Before that though, we have our armor stats and mods. Stats are a pretty standard investment. You want to prioritize resilience, recovery, then discipline and strength are about equal. As for our mods, there isn't much that interfaces with our glaive melee. For our helmet, you're going to run Siphon so that you can spawn some orbs. I also have a hands-on for when we do actually get kills with melees outside of the glaive. For the arms, we have a heavy-handed for orbs with those same melee kills, and an impact induction as a means to refund some more grenade energy. Chest is for resists, catered to the activity. And then legs is a recuperation for an instant health bump, better already for health regen, and an innervation for some grenade energy, all these happening on orb pickup. And then the class item has special finisher and powerful attraction with a bomber or a proximity ward if you want the extra survivability. Again, not a whole lot translate from glaive melees to armor mods, but where the most of this entangling does happen is in the artifact. Here, there are a number of mods to focus on. Unstoppable Glaive is cool because it actually allows Winterbite to stun unstops on the first melee hit, rather than the third like normal. But then outside of champion stuff, we have Hold the Line, which can give us a bit of bonus healing, but honestly, it's got too long of a cooldown to actually be super worth it. The real big ticket item though is No Bell. This reads, Rapid Glaive Melee Final Blows grant special ammo glaives additional ammo. Blocking damage with glaives increases their melee damage to targets. The only benefit we're actually getting here is the main one, where we get even more melee damage. How it works is that we get a buff after blocking any damage with a glaive. While it's active, we just get bonus damage to anything, which when factored in and stacked with everything else, brings our third hit up to 210,000 damage. And that's actually a 146% increase over the last number, which compared to our base melee from way back in the beginning is a total of 900% increase. Or in a nicer looking fashion, and what you might have seen in the thumbnail, our glaive deals 1000% of its base melee damage. Also, technically this isn't even the end of stacking because you can add on debuffs, but that does require a bit more effort than I'd like, and I don't want to share something so gimmicky to you guys. Now with that said, there's two more artifact mods I want to mention, being Unraveling Orbs, which gives strand weapons unraveling rounds on orb pickup, and Horde Shuttle, which makes threadlings spawn from unraveled enemies. Our grapple melee also unravels, and if you have a strand weapon, you can easily just tap things to make them unraveled, which while we slay out with Winterbite and our melees, will be constantly spawning threadlings. So this is an easy thing to lean into if you wanted to add just a bit more to this build. But now then, we know how to make our Winterbite deal insane amounts of damage, but how do we put it together? Well, for that, we have the gameplay loop. Luckily, like all my builds, it's pretty simple. To begin, we just need one orb or a tangle. We can get these from a frenzied blade kill, a grapple melee kill, a siphon proc, or even from a teammate. But once we have an orb or a tangle, we'll use that to get Woven Mail. Once we have Woven Mail, simply never stop meleeing with Winterbite. As you get kills, you'll activate Banner of War, which will be increasing your damage and healing you and your teammates. While in the thick of it, Synthoceps is procced, giving you more damage. Our Fragments will be ensuring that you constantly have Woven Mail and are proccing Into the Fray. When necessary, use your melee and grenade abilities, and if you ever get in a really sticky spot, just super. But the main loop is completely just melee. Melee, 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 melee. All of this is about being in the enemy's face, too tanky to die, and too lethal to let anything escape. This combo even goes crazy on dungeon and raid bosses, as you can see in this next clip. So yeah, if you haven't tried Strand Titan since Prismatic came out, I don't blame you, but if you're looking for another flavor of broken and you play Titan, you gotta try this. Of course, dim link down below, and I actually think that's everything I wanted to say. Thank you so much for getting this far into the video. Your viewership means an absolute ton. If you want to support me and support the channel, a like, a comment, a subscription goes a very long way. You can also join the channel with a membership if you really want to go the extra mile, but that is totally optional. If you want to support me and support the channel, but you can't think of a comment though, comment down below, Winterbite Titan. And with that, as usual, I hope you are having a great day, and I hope to see you around.